Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Kevin's Magic Hat. Here is another magic make. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you how I made this beautiful solid wood black desk inspired by Desksquire, created by another YouTube maker out there, Foureyes Furniture. I purchased his plans online. I'll link to those in the description below, and I modified it to suit my needs. Oh hey, didn't see you there. It's editor Kevin from the future, wearing different glasses to show that time has passed. What I just said in the past, why? I did not buy his plans and modify them. I did end up buying his plans after I was done with the build to show my support for an artist I enjoy, and if you could do the same for an artist you enjoy, please do so. Actually, I don't have like any of the tools that guy has. He has a professional shop. I have mostly hand tools and a miter saw. So what I did was took screenshots of the video of the design I loved and sort of reverse engineered it and made all the joinery fit what I could do, and then made some modifications to fit my needs. Now back to the video. Is that this desk is now completely knocked down, meaning I can take it apart and put it back together very quickly, because this new work from home space that I'm developing is going to be changing a lot over the coming months. And I'll be definitely keeping you guys updated, if not here, over on the gram at Kevin's Magic Hat. No apostrophe, no spaces. I'm excited to show you guys how I got this done, so let's jump into it. To get this build kicked off right, I started by making myself some templates. To make these templates, I made 3D models of the leg pieces, and then I just programmed my router to cut those pieces out. Let me tell you, routing with templates is an absolute game changer for anyone who doesn't have a lot of equipment, because they let you make very complex shapes very accurately with just one simple hand tool. And no, you do not need a CNC router like I do to get started with template routing. 1. Lots of woodworkers out there sell their templates online. But 2, you can make your own fairly easily. You can make a design on paper, glue that paper onto some scrap wood, and cut it out as neatly as possible, and then you can make a bunch of duplicates of that piece with a router. I took my templates, I traced them out onto some scrap wood here, and then I just roughly cut them out with a jigsaw. It'd be a similar process if you were going to make your own templates from scratch. Whoops. I broke the jigsaw blade there. Just a reminder, take your time and be safe. It's not only safe for you, but it's also better for your tools if you're not too rough with them. After I have the rough shape cut out, then I can come back with that router and then just kind of trace it. It's fairly easy. You just have to take your time and make sure you're resting the router nice and square on your template. Once you're done with a couple passes using the template, then you can just use your workpiece as a template for itself, like I'm doing here. I flipped it over and just kept on cutting. Now, with the help of templates like these, I was able to make some nice uniform pieces. However, how do those pieces get together all nice and flush? Well, what I did was make half-lap joints. Typically, a half-lap joint, you take half the material off of one piece, half the material off another piece, and they have little things that overlap each other. half flat. For my purposes, the side aprons here, whoops, they're half the thickness of the main leg pieces, so I only had to remove material from the legs to get the aprons flush. I did that over on the miter saw. Now to make these half lap joints just right, I started with a line where the joint would have to end, and I cut along that line quite shallowly. After I made that first cut, I just checked against the apron piece to see how far I had to go to make it the right depth. And I just kind of snuck up on that depth. You don't want to go too far because you can always take away more material, but you can't add it back, or at least not easily. But once I had that depth dialed in, I just made a bunch of cuts, blah blah blah, fast forward, until I was left with a bunch of fins that I can either crack off by hand and clean up with a chisel or clean up with some sanding. I did a little bit of both. Once I had that nice and cleaned up, I just double checked with the apron, and sure enough, it's a snug fit. And I ended up with an assembly that looked pretty good in the end. They weren't perfect, but they were good enough for this desk. It's for personal use, not a commission. After that, I moved on to the tabletop. Not much had to be done on the tabletop. I purchased a piece of wood that was just the right size for it. One of the things I did want to do was to take those sharp corners and make them round. So I 3D printed and designed this simple radius jig to give them a 1-inch radius. And let me tell you, routers make for some pretty smooth looking B-roll. Check this out. The last thing to do was to add a chamfer to the underside of the table, so I enlisted the help of a friend to turn it over. Whoops, flip it over. And then I just added a chamfer bit to my router and ran it along the edge. Pretty straightforward. That just adds a bit of an undercut at a 45-degree angle, and that gives the table bit of an illusion of being skinnier and then more of a floaty feeling. And you never know when you're going to need an extra set of hands. Last thing to do after the tabletop was to make the remaining aprons and skirts. To do that, it was pretty simple. Just rip down some wood and then chop it to the right size. Except for the rear apron on the side you would tuck your chair into. For that one, I wanted to match the angle of the leg assembly a little better, so I wanted to add a chamfer to it. So I do the same thing and run my chamfer bit along the edge, but it leaves this ugly step in the top bit there. So I come back afterwards with a bit of sanding and I take care of it. And by a bit of sanding, I mean a ton of sanding. It took forever, but the results speak for themselves. Take a look. Now, the aprons were done, the tabletop cut out, the legs cut out and assembled. All I had to do was put these pieces together. How did I do that? Now here's where the whole knockdown aspect comes into play. I used a cheap cross dowel jig that I bought off Amazon to drill some holes for cross dowels. Cross dowels are kind of hard to explain. It's just a special kind of nut and bolt system where the nut goes in, perpendicular to the bolt. To help you guys understand, I created this little animation. Check it out. Let's focus in on just one of these joints and take an X-ray inside of the wood. As you can see, there are two sets of holes that are perpendicular to each other. Into one set of hole, we put the cross dowel nut. In the other set of holes, we put in a pair of bolts. You screw the bolts into the nuts, and that tightens everything down, creating a nice strong joint without any other glue or other permanent fasteners. As you can see, here's the cross dowel jig, and it helps me make a set of holes that are perpendicular to each other in a piece of wood. It's a fairly easy process, but kind of tedious, and all in all, I had to make a couple dozen of these holes to get all of the parts nice and strongly fastened together. Once I had a couple of these holes done in a few parts, I began assembling the desk to help me figure out where the rest of them needed to go. As you can see, I have the two top aprons in place, holding together the two leg assemblies, and all that's left here is to figure out where exactly I want the bottom skirt to live. Again, just with a little help, I was able to get these drilled in nice and neat. Need a little bit of clamping force because one of my legs had bowed over time just a little bit, but these cross dowels got it nice and into place permanently. After all these cross dowels were done, I had to figure out how the tabletop was going to get on there. So you can see I'm just measuring around and making sure the tabletop is nice and centered onto my leg assemblies here. And once that's done, I screw it into place just to hold it down. And then I start drilling some larger holes where I can recess some more decorative black Chicago screws, which are essentially fancier nuts and bolts. Now with all the pieces done, all of the holes drilled, the desk essentially assembled into its final form, the only thing left to do was to sand and stain. And those two processes are super long and boring. So we're going to skip over those and get straight to the glam shots. But before that, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And follow me not only here, but over on Instagram at Kevin's Magic Hat. No apostrophes, no spaces. If you want to know more about anything I used in this video, from the original plans, all the way down to the tools, anything like that, links will be in the description down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.